There is an argument to be had that AEW have some of the most prestigious titles in the business despite their short history. There has been a number of title reigns that have helped shape the belt's prestige and perception of importance amongst fans, for better or for worse. For anyone in the future, the current champions right now are the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega, the AEW TNT Champion Sammy Guevara, the AEW Tag Team Champions, the Lucha Brothers, and Britt Baker, who is still the AEW Women's Champion. So all of these reigns won't be discussed in today's video, but will be saved for a potential future video. So with that said, let's rank every single completed AEW Championship reign from worst to best. And first off, we start with Nyla Rose's Women's Championship run. This did start out great with what at the time was considered as the best women's wrestling match in AEW, with Nyla defeating RIHO to become the second ever AEW Women's World Champion on an episode of Dynamite back in February 2020. The reign is also groundbreaking in the sense that Rose became the first ever transgender woman to hold a championship in a major wrestling company, so that in itself does deserve a lot of credit. However, the praise does end there, as she only had one title defense in her 4-month reign. Her reign didn't really benefit anyone and raised several questions of AEW's seriousness in handling their women's division. She would soon lose the championship to HIKARU SHIDA, and not a single complaint was heard. Next up, we have Cody Rhodes' second reign as TNT Champion. This reign is far down the list due to its short duration, but still more was accomplished in it than Nyla Rose's reign that was previously discussed. After hints of a potential heel turn, he would defeat BRODIE Lee to win back his title in the now infamous dog collar match on Dynamite in October 2020, showing the true power of black hair dye. Another highlight was the time limit draw with Orange Cassidy, followed by a rematch with Cassidy looking strong in defeat. As mentioned earlier, the title reign ended just as quickly as it started, but not before turning Darby Allin from a hot prospect into a top star. And now we move on to the first ever AEW World Tag Team Championship reign, and AEW chose a good team of established veterans to become their inaugural Tag Team Champions. Following a great tag team tournament, Scorpio Sky and Frankie Kazarian of SCU defeated Penta El0M and his Lucha brother Rey Fenix to be crowned champions. This was a tournament that did well to position SCU as the undisputed best in the division at the time. They had stellar title defenses against Private Party and the Lucha Brothers. However, their reign is the second shortest in tag title history, and nothing else really noteworthy was accomplished other than the great match they had losing the belts to Page and Omega, which is when the division really started to pick up some steam. As a huge Darby Allin fan, it pains me to put his AEW TNT Championship reign so low. However, the run saw long barren spells with no defenses, with it taking 2 months for Darby to defend the title for the first time. In the first 4 months of the reign, Darby would make just 4 defenses, averaging 1 per month, a far cry from the almost weekly precedent set by the previous champion Cody Rhodes in his first reign. In the end, AEW did correct this issue by giving Darby 5 defenses on an almost weekly basis, before he would be stopped in vicious fashion by MIRO, losing the title via referee stoppage. Unfortunately, the initial months of the run hold this one back, but the latter stages did help elevate Darby to the next level, with fans feeling the AEW TNT title won't be the peak of his AEW career. RIHO was one of the finest talents AEW acquired during their early days. She is a youngster with an impressive amount of experience in the Joshi style of wrestling, and AEW made the right call when they booked her to become their inaugural women's champion. She has a very likable personality, and mixing that with her small size made her a great underdog champion, and her reign had some underrated title defenses against the likes of Britt Baker and Chris Statlander. RIHO eventually lost the title to the individual that she pinned to win it in the first place, Nyla Rose, and as mentioned earlier, was considered the best women's match in AEW history up until that point. During her reign, the women's division was still in its infancy, and she carried the top spot well, having no issues in gaining fan support. The debut of FTR was hyped up by AEW fans long before their release from WWE, when rumours began to swirl that they wanted out of their contracts. When the time finally came for them to show up on Dynamite, they ploughed through the competition with witty tag team tactics. The highlight of their AEW run so far came when they ended the phenomenal tag title reign of Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. After winning, they didn't hold the titles for long, but still managed to have solid title defenses against 3 teams from AEW's stacked and diverse tag division. Their reign came to an end when they lost to the Young Bucks in the much anticipated dream match that more than delivered. It's easy to say that they would be a lot higher on this list had they been given a longer run with the titles. There is no surprise AEW retired the first version of the TNT Championship to pay tribute to the late Brody Lee. Lee's first and only title victory in AEW was against Cody Rhodes for the TNT title in a match that shocked fans with its sheer brutality. It was a quick squash match and it was a great way to showcase Lee as a powerhouse and a huge star, adding some much needed legitimacy to the Dark Order. Lee had 2 successful defenses against Dustin Rhodes and Orange Cassidy before eventually losing the title when Cody returned from his hiatus in the aforementioned dog collar match, which was sadly Brody's last of his career. Despite its length, this reign really showed off the untapped potential Brody had as a main event star. One of AEW's most dominant champions, HIKARU Shida, has been with the company since its inception. However, it would take nearly a year after her debut to finally win the AEW Women's World Championship at Double or Nothing 2020 by defeating NYLA Rose. What followed was the longest reign by any AEW champion as of now, lasting a whopping 372 days. During her reign, she would go on to face a set of diverse competitors, going on to help elevate AEW's own talents such as Tai Conti, Abaddon and Britt Baker, whilst allowing non-AEW talent like RIHO Mizunami to shine in a teacher versus student encounter. Her matches were always of high quality and her reign helped bring in some much needed prestige to the Women's Championship following the bump in the road that came prior. Many fans were surprised when the Young Bucks failed to win Tag Team Gold in the company's starting year, going as far as to losing in the first round of the inaugural championship tournament, putting Private Party on the map. Their championship dry spell would finally end as they dethroned arch rivals FTR to become the new AEW World Tag Team Champions. Since then, Matt and Nick Jackson would both turn heel and reign as champions for just over 300 days until finally the Lucha Brothers would take the titles away from them at All Out 2021 in a tremendous cage match. Their reign included title defenses against multiple high-level opponents such as the Inner Circle, Jurassic Express, the Death Triangle, and the team of Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, even pinning the former AEW World Champion in the process. The Bucks would also be responsible for ending the team of SCU, making the run a significant part of AEW for close to a year. God's favourite champion Miro had one of the most underwhelming debuts in AEW history, to say the least. His initial gimmick of a gamer who was the best man of Kip Sabian didn't resonate well with fans, but thankfully Miro embraced his inner monster, debuting the Redeemer gimmick. He quickly found success, defeating Darby Allin to become the TNT Champion. Although his title reign was somewhat short, it was one of the most dominant in company history. With 4 of his title matches ending in referee stoppage, Miro was presented as an unstoppable machine. Towards the end of his reign, his competitors began to target his neck and cracks began to show in Miro's invincibility, but despite this, his reign was so dominant that his eventual defeat at the hands of Sammy Guevara was a shocking upset. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head, hopefully, towards 100,000 subscribers. But now, let's press play on the video. Cody Rhodes won an exciting tournament to become the first ever AEW TNT Champion, being victorious in the final of a David vs Goliath type collision against Lance Archer. Cody was presented with the belt by Mike Tyson and would then make defenses most weeks in an open challenge, reminiscent of John Cena's 2015 US title run. The formula clearly worked and fans couldn't wait to see who would step up to the challenge next, with each match having good storytelling, with Cody making himself and his opponents look great. The run made stars of Jungle Boy, Ricky Starks, Eddie Kingston, and many more despite losses, with Brody Lee eventually crushing the champion to take him to a whole new level. AEW announced the TNT Championship as a secondary title, but Cody Rhodes' great reign made it one of the most talked about wrestling championships today. One of AEW's biggest selling points has been their employment of one of the best veterans in the game. During the first ever AEW World Championship reign, Chris Jericho appealed to WWE fans looking for an alternative, as well as lapsed fans who had tuned into AEW for a familiar face. All Elite Wrestling made sure to crown Jericho as their first world champion to ensure they made the most of the attention he brought and to start the belt's lineage with prestige. They would book the start of the reign excellently, with Jericho beating Hangman Page, triggering the loser's story arc that is still evolving to this day. Jericho as the top guy brought eyes on breakout stars like Jungle Boy and Darby Allin, whilst he worked with established stars such as Cody Rhodes and Jon Moxley. Of course, the latter would go on to bring the reign of Le Champion to an end in arguably the title's best rivalry to date. Whilst AEW is said to have the most stacked tag team division in modern history, this wasn't the case before Hangman Page and Kenny Omega joined forces. Most of the teams were unknown to the masses, but by putting two main event level players together, it was time for the division to shine. Omega and Page kept viewers' attentions on the tag division with their masterful storytelling, showcasing a long-term build to their eventual split. Their masterpiece against the Lucha Brothers on Dynamite came second only to a match which, in my opinion, is the best match AEW has seen to date, where they faced off against the Young Bucks at AEW Revolution 2020. They'd eventually lose the titles to FTR in an epic encounter before the much anticipated split occurred as Omega betrayed the Hangman to spark a redemption arc fans are still clamoring to see the conclusion of over 1 year later. One of the reasons that AEW's 2020 is discussed more positively than their Stamford rivals is because of the reign of Jon Moxley. Moxley became the second ever AEW World Champion and held the title for the bulk of the year. He won it from Jericho in a feel-good moment, then went on to have successful title defenses against the likes of Brodie Lee, MJF, Darby Allin, and Eddie Kingston, elevating everyone he touched to the next level. The fact that almost every match was a fresh one and had its own unique finish makes it even better. Finally, Mox would lose the title to Kenny Omega following a storyline that is one of the best AEW has seen, with his reign seeing varied opponents consistently killer promos as he carried an entire company on his back through what is likely the hardest challenge AEW will ever face. Moxley used the chip on his shoulder to produce the best run of his career so far. And before you go, why not check out my video where I discuss 10 wrestlers that would be perfect members of the Elite.